This does not equal chord. This is representation of chord. In other words,
Ah.
this is not a C chord. This is 3 notes that are in a C chord. But that's also to say that it's 3 notes that could be in a bunch of other chords too.
Whoa, mind blown. That's crazy.
Right? I mean, it blew my mind.
I'm so excited to share this recent conversation that I had with Aaron Weinstein, who is a jazz mandolin and chord melody master. And I told him afterwards that this was just a thinly veiled excuse for me to have a personal lesson with him and to get to pick his brain on this topic, because no one really plays chord melody quite like Aaron does. And Aaron was so gracious to oblige. There's so much information in this video. Anyone who's interested in this style of music is gonna find a wealth of resources to learn from. In the rest of the video, it's just me kind of nodding blankly, trying to pretend like I know how to play jazz on the mandolin. But before we get started, I wanted to mention that Aaron has some other amazing learning resources out there. He wrote a whole book on chord melody called Mandolin Chord Melody System. It gets rave reviews. And he also has 2 courses up on Peghead Nation where you can learn more chord melody from him, as well as swing rhythms and how to take chord solos, which sounds awesome. Aaron also gives private lessons, and you can reach out to him for scheduling at his email or Instagram account. Those are linked below as well. And just a little aside here, if you like this video and you want to support the channel, then you can do so in a couple ways. One, just by liking this video below and subscribing to the channel. It helps out so much. And then you can do so additionally by supporting us over on Patreon. And that's where you're gonna get all sorts of additional benefits like PDF transcriptions and backing tracks and a bunch of other stuff that you won't find here. So thanks for checking it out, and we'll get right into it here, into the thick of it. Buckle up. Love to talk more about chord melody because, man, your YouTube channel has been so inspiring to me over the years. I mean, it was a big inspiration for starting this Mandolin Mondays thing, which I'm so grateful for, you being a part of recently with the very thought of you video that you sent in. I've never seen the mandolin played like this before until I saw your videos. You've just elevated the art form of chord melody on the mandolin to a level that no one's ever done before. And I still don't know how you do it. So I would love, if you're up for it, I would love to just sit down and pick your brain about, like, how do you start one of those arrangements? What's arranged? What's improvised? How does it change from performance to performance? What's going through your mind while you're doing that? I know that's a big question, but if you're up for it, I'd love to.
Let's start somewhere and see. We'll see where we get. You know, in if we're talking about the melody, which I mean, a lot of those things that I do, it's like the melody, and then there's other stuff that comes afterwards. But if we're talking about the melody, it's, kind of the Jethro Burns rules of law still do apply. It's chord melody. There's 2 things happening. You need to hear that melody, and you need to hear maybe not a chord, but you need to hear enough of the harmony, enough of the time, so we know what's happening. Chord-wise, like fingering-wise, voicing-wise, there's not that much happening, and no one, but very few people, like, they think I'm kidding or I'm not telling the secret, and there is no. There's just a handful of voicings. A lot of kind of how I think about doing it is not so much answering the question that seems to be what I hear a lot of people asking, which is like, how else can I voice the thing? But before I even look for another way to voice it, I look for, like, is there another way I can play the voicing I have to give myself a different sound? Let's maybe take a tune that a lot of people play. Seems like Lady Be Good is the one that everyone's into, in the key of G, which, the minute you go with horn players, you're going to probably be moving it down a step, but let's keep it in G for now. So the first, let's just look at that first chunk of the melody. I mean, right? I mean, it's a relatively simple melody. Before I can figure out anything about how I want to voice it, I got to know what those chords are.
Sure.
If I don't know that, it's like I don't know where to go with it. So that would be the first thing, is figure out that melody and figure out the chords. So it's basically a G, and then C7, and then back to G, and then E7.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, let's just look at that much.
Sure, yeah.
So, here's the thing, and again, the Jethro rules of law. Most of the time, keep that melody on top.
Sure.
Get a voicing with the melody on top, which means that where you play the thing on the instrument, you might want to move it, or you might want to put it in a different key, because, if we're sticking to that idea, you know, if this is the melody, we have two strings to work with.
Right.
Let's say we're playing this in the key of C. So now we have one string to work with.
No idea.
If that was the case, I might think, well, maybe move it up so I have a little something to do. I mean, otherwise I'm pretty limited. However, in the key of G, Lady Be Good doesn't give us this problem. So it's just a matter of like, I need a G chord and I need this note in it.
Mhm.
Uh, Now it's go pick your voicing. You can come up with something that's like maybe not something you would play for rhythm, or you can, yeah, I mean, this is a very kind of go-to rootless G6 chord, courtesy of Don Sternberg, I think via Jethro. So B, E, D. um, and it satisfies, like, we checked off all the boxes. We have our melody, we have our chord. So we're going to hear that it's a G chord, we're going to hear that melody. Now the next phrase is, here's our melody,
Right.
and we have a C7. So, before I start thinking, what are the notes in C7 and what's the melody and what do I have left? I'll be like, where do I know a C7 around that melody? I mean, it's like so nuts and bolts as that. And, that if someone says, play me a C7, I would probably do that one without thinking very much, right? Like, that's a go-to three-note C7. And then the first thing I think is like, can I grab, literally, like with my with my one remaining finger, can I get that melody? And the answer is like, yeah, I can. So now if you want to play with third finger or fourth finger, I'm some people are real sticklers. My feeling is like, if you can play the thing as fast as you need to, play with whatever finger is going to be okay for that. But so we have, there's chord melody. Now, then the other question that I consider is like, how much chord stuff do I need within that melody? Because I suppose we could play like, it just sounds like a typewriter after a while. Taking out more is often more effective than putting in more. So like, play less chord stuff. Again, it's just enough for us to hear that the tonality. Um, uh, so let's just for a minute stick with that voicing and that voicing. Even within that world of these two voicings and that melody on the A string, there's a bunch of stuff you could do with it.
Mhm.
In other words, you could strum, and this gets into like right hand stuff where you could strum. So we're just strumming straight through to get to that melody note, or you can play the melody note and then the chord, like
Ah, that's really nice. Yeah.
well, yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
yeah, that's
So like,
fun.
if you're doing that, I typically like melody note with the upstroke, so you get the
Gotcha.
chord with the downstroke.
Nice. That's a good idea. Yeah, that feels really natural. That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. I mean, if someone's like watching this and that has never done that, it might feel awkward at first, but like, it gets comfortable pretty quick. And what that allows is like, if the first time through it's an AABA form, the first time if you're doing, the second time maybe, and suddenly it sounds different. You get a little variation, but you haven't done it. The variations can come from here as much as they can come from here. You don't have to play the whole chord to get the sound of the chord. So, I mean, you can just play like one note if it's the right note, and that's a way to go. So, and in terms of what's the right note, well, like, if you're playing this G6 and you're playing that C7, just like look at what your fingers are doing. Like, your fingers are doing a lot of the work for you. Just look at what they're doing. They're giving you these little chromatic pathways. They're showing you there's a B natural on that first chord, and then even if someone doesn't know the notes on the fretboard, they can see that it's moving down a fret.
Mhm.
So, you know, or do a combination of those things. You could do that and start it, and now it starts to sound like a little bass line. Without, again, notice there's like no theory being put into this equation. It's very much like where are the chords I know, what's going on, and that's that's a big part of it.
Mhm.
There's like a tiny little other part that I'm hesitant to talk about because it's maybe the like I think some people think it's the cooler thing. Again, it goes back to like, well, what other voicings or what other chords or what substitutions? And I'm very much like, well, before you even look for that stuff, like, see what you could do, stretch all the stuff that you've given yourself.
Right.
But there's a world in which you can think if you're going from G6 to C7,
Mhm.
you know, G to C, what can get you to C7? Well, G7 can get you to C7.
Right.
So if you're going, like, if you're thinking that way and you have a melody to deal with, it would be like G, G7, C7. G7 on the C note, that's not going to work. Because if you're thinking G7, but you have a C to deal with, then deal's off. It doesn't work. It's a bad substitution because it doesn't. Melody is still our focus there.
Mhm. Right.
So it's like, well, okay, well, what can get us to G7? It's a 5 chord, so where's a 2 chord? So you have a D minor that could get you to G7.
Oh.
So if you think about like G, D minor, G7, C7,
Ooh, yeah, that's nice.
and then, so G6, D minor, G7, C7, D minor, G7, C7.
Nice. That's
Okay,
really
now we
cool.
could throw in more. So, like, if you're going on that path, then it's like, okay, now let's look at the voicings and see if we could do something that's actually does something for the instruments. So, G, uh, so D minor, maybe D minor. Now, if you do a G7 like that, I mean, it's fine. So that could be okay. But if you do so
Ooh.
G7 with flat 9,
Yeah,
you still get a G7, but then you get a chromatic.
that's really nice. Is it
So
okay to put the 9 in the bass like that? I never thought of that.
I mean I think if it sounds okay,
Yeah, it sounds great. I don't know why I asked that,
and
but
notice this is nothing you would ever play as a rhythm section person. Like you would never do like it's like that's just that's irritating is what that is. Like as a rhythm, like let the solos be unless they're playing on that and you're like jumping on that wagon with them. But this is for chord melody stuff when it's just you, or maybe it's you with a bass player and you've talked about the changes that you're gonna do. But if this is where we're at with like if that's where we're at, then just looking at the fretboard, forget theory. That's our first chord. Our bass note is here.
yeah,
Then that's our next chord. Our bass note is here.
right.
So there's a little runway for us now.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. That sounds so good. Yeah.
And so if you throw all that together, it can kind of give the illusion of like you're reharmonizing it and you're playing a little bass line. So if you're coming off of like a second A section now, you know. Oh, and no. Notice right there, I didn't even go to the C7 because I wanted that. I sacrificed the chord uh, for the bass note, and then I'll go to that C7 right afterwards. So we do want to have to get that C7, but we can delay it. You can kind of make your way there in different ways, but as long as you get there in time to hear that chord happen, Um, you can if you've already played that melody once or twice, like if you've I kind of feel, and like I'm a little conservative about this, but I kind of feel like the first time you hit a melody, like don't be too fancy with it. Let us hear. If you're gonna be all clever and do all your embellishments, like let's understand what you're embellishing.
Sure, yeah.
So lay it down, and but if you've already played it, like, and you get away from that melody for a little longer, you skip one of those phrases, like I don't know, something like I mean, like if you kind of get away from that melody for a while and then go back to, like, if you're at the end of the chorus, or if you're at your second chorus or something, no one's gonna be like what song is that? Uh, like I
Hopefully.
think I think we'll all still be on track with that, and it's Don Sternberg and Jethro Burns, and then guitar players. Like that's my world of, like, influence on the mandolin in terms of chord stuff. And when you only because in terms of chords and solo playing, uh, in this kind of music, like there's a whole history that goes back almost as far as the history of jazz, with guitar players exploring this sort of stuff on their instrument. There's very, very little of it on the mandolin. Um, so why not take a look at what some of those guitar players are doing? They're really smart. They figured out some cool things. And like when you listen to Joe Pass, those virtuoso records, which are insanely good, obviously, just it's everything. He does that a lot of the time. Like he'll just step away from that melody at a certain point because we know what's going on already.
I was just having my mind blown there, getting to see you do this just off the cuff with a tune like this. I'm sure you played it before, but just all the variations that you're able to come with all on the spot.
Well, that one, I mean, that one I have done before, so it's not like yeah.
Well, I was wondering, and for other folks out there just getting into this, like how much of this, for like an arrangement you've done on YouTube, how much is it planned out, and how much is it just kind of discovering how it happens in the moment?
The whole game for me on those ballads is what moves am I going to make and how am I going to make them. So, um, that thing on the very thought of you that just went up, like that was not like, oh, let me just play it and see what happens. It was like, I really kind of worked through that to figure out ways to go about playing through that melody, and chords and moving and counterpoints and things like that. So in terms of ballads, I kind of use those as an opportunity just to really sit down and look at how I want to do it. Um, with the more up tempo things, usually the melodies, I kind of figure out how I want to go about those, because I guess, like, if I were to play it on the fly, I could figure something out, but it's like, why not take another moment and really figure out different ways to go about those things, in a way for me that would take a minute of thinking. And I mean, I don't mean a literal minute. I mean, like, let me sit down and, okay, so I did this first day this way. So, like, what's another way to approach it? And and then the structure of those things. I mean, because it's just me playing, like, if I don't give myself structure, I'm just gonna play into oblivion, and it's gonna be stupid. So I want to give myself some sense of, like, okay, solo, or solo for a half chorus, and do this. Let's figure out a shout chorus, and so yeah, I mean, there is some structure to it, and also because it's just like early on, it was a little like I disagree with a lot of what I played.
Really?
I think it's not realistic in terms of musicality. I mean, it's
Mm.
just like a lot of that stuff becomes finger motion stuff. Like, you do it because you can. It's like, what does that really amount to? I don't know. Maybe it's fun to listen to, but there's a lot of kind of that these kind of ridiculous, and it's just like, what is that? That's like, congratulations, you practiced. I mean, but as you can hear, I have not practiced those things in a while. At a certain point, I wanted to try to get away from anything chord wise being related strictly to a voicing. And I was interested in, what if, and Howard Alden was the first person I heard, guitar player, I heard to do this live. He was playing lines in the same way that, someone would play them on a violin or a trumpet, but he was incorporating chords into those lines.
Yeah. I don't know how to do that. Like what was the moment for you when you just were able to start doing that?
Well, I mean, there's different ways to go about it, but I think an accessible point, like way to do it is just consider, if you're playing a line and you happen to be on a note that is the top of a voicing that play the voicing. Lady Be Good. I mean, it's just like, wait, it's an E7. Do I know? Is there an E7 around? So it's either just playing a line and just kind of clocking, like, is there a chord around, or knowing that you know where an E7 is and you know the top note of it, and playing something that will get you to that top note. I mean, that's fine too. So um, let's say let's say we're going to hit this E7,
Sure.
this voicing of
I know that
E7
one.
on E7. So solo and solo and solo, and then at some point on this E7, we're going to get ourselves here.
Sure.
You know, there we got it. We got it. We got it. We got it. Again, it's not that different than if you're just playing single note lines and you're thinking about entry points into chords.
Mm.
Um, but the entry points, it's still an entry point. It just happens to be the top note of a voicing. What it requires is to kind of not exclusively think about those voicings as blocks.
Mm. Oh, okay.
But say like, okay, yeah, this is a block and it means E7, but it contains a top note that's called E. Um, so it's like kind of isolating those, isolating the top note of knowing that that can become that,
Sure.
or
Sure.
knowing that that can become that. Knowing where you are.
That kind of answers another question of mine. I was wondering, like, when you play chord melody or when you're improvising chords and lines, are you mostly thinking about the top note like that?
Well, I mean, if you're improvising a line, if it's just one line, then I guess everything is the top note.
There you go. Yeah.
Um, yeah, 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 definitely. And if you're trying to incorporate some chords, that's in like a chord melody fashion. Um, that would be the way to do it. Where's the top note of that chord? Um, yeah, for definitely. There's a kind of a cool mandolin chord thing it's pretty obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me. I mean, you want to see that thing?
I would love to. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
What do you got?
so like forever and ever, it's like I just equated shapes with certain chords, and that's that. Like, there's my C chord. Um, you know, this does not equal chord. This is representation of chord. In other words,
Oh.
this is not a C chord. This is three notes that are in a C chord. But that's also to say that it's three notes that could be in a bunch of other chords too.
Whoa, mind blown. That's crazy.
Right. I mean, it blew my mind. I mean, and it's such a simple thing. Like, but it's when we're so kind of into the instrument, we just kind of think like, okay, D7, boom, there's my shape of D7. Here's my shape of C. And when I've gotten away from that, and I thought, well, here's three notes. What could these three notes be? I mean, the obvious ones like relative majors and minors are a thing. So if it's a C major, it could also be an A minor.
Oh.
A minor 7, in this case, 3, 7, 5. However, the kind of the catch of it is that you can't just like lay it down and say, ah, there, it's A minor. Like it's A minor if you make it A minor, if you put it in the context so we hear it as A minor, versus
Yeah.
putting it in the context so we hear it as C. So like if we're calling it C, it sounds like C. You know, it's all C. But now if we call it A minor, A minor to D7, G to back to this A minor that was a C just a moment ago. The one that really blew my mind is like is when and maybe I get too excited about this one, but like this C, this like of course it's C, it's like the first or second chord that it's like
Sure.
the one of the first chords we all learn.
Yeah.
I realized that like under the right circumstances, and that's the big key here, like this could also function as an E flat 7.
Wait.
And here's why. There's so little of E flat 7 in it, but there's enough. And so well, I mean, technically it sounds fancy, but I mean, so you have the third of E flat, you have the
Yeah.
flat 9 of E flat,
Uh-huh.
and then you have the 13 of E flat. So you have E flat 13, flat 9 out of this stupid little thing. I mean, it's not stupid, it's wonderful. But you can't just play this and say it's an E flat 13, flat 9. But if you surround it by the stuff, it'll work. So like
I don't believe it.
so if we're in A flat now,
Whoa.
I mean that one blew my mind. Because it's like this simple chord that we've learned, so long ago and have thought of in just one context, and suddenly like it can be so many different things, and every voicing is that. So that keeps me going. I like that.
That is nuts. I never
It's I
never
mean
would have
it's so
dreamed.
nerdy. It's so like esoteric nerdy mandolin stuff, but for me that's kind of the thing I'm really looking at the moment.
I would love to see the world through your eyes, Aaron.
You- No, no, because then you have to see everything through my eyes.
Where do you point like other mandolin players to learn all this harmonic theory that you're talking about here? I've read like a little bit of that jazz theory book. Are there any other resources that you would point people to?
There's so many really good theory books, but I think in terms of like practical theory for playing tunes, um, I think recognizing progressions, because if you don't just memorize, I mean, I think a lot of people have trouble memorizing tunes because they see every chord as an isolated chord, and it's just like memorizing numbers of pi. It's like there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just you got to keep running it. But if you can make some kind of logical understanding of the thing, um, I think it makes all the difference. So what that means is, I mean, there's those 1 6 2 5 situations, but a lot of the time it's as simple as like a 5 chord moving to a 1 chord. When you see a tune where G7 moves to C, it's not random. It's I mean it is theory, but it's practical theory. Or D minor moving to G7 moving to C. The cycle of fourths tells you all that stuff. If you know the cycle of fourths, you know all your 2 5 1s.
Mm-hmm.
And by knowing cycle of fourths, I mean being able to say it like your ABCs. I mean just being able to run through it. That it's just because if you have to think about the order, I think you're in a place where you can't immediately kind of identify stuff, and you want to get at that place where it's all like A B C D E F G H I J K L M N O P, like C F B flat E flat A flat D flat G flat B E A D G. Just it's like there for you. So then when you look at a tune like Lady Be Good and you see E7 moving to A minor, moving to D7, moving to G, it's you can start to identify those things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you learn one song and you not just learn the song but understand kind of that just core movement of the song, um, after, 5 or 10, learning 5 or 10 songs, you're going to start to see patterns repeating in the next 5 and 10 songs. Like the bridge of Honeysuckle Rose is so prevalent that they call it a Honeysuckle Rose bridge. Oh, I don't know the bridge of this tune. Oh, it's Honeysuckle Rose. Okay, got it. Or or I Got Rhythm as an entire form, or the
Right.
bridge of I Got Rhythm, or the A section of I Got Rhythm. Um, but more often, you're going to see like, oh wait, that's like the first 4 bars of Deed I Do, or Don't Get Around Much Anymore. Or, you'll see it in little chunks. And I think just being aware that not every song has a unique progression.
Hmm.
In fact, very few do. Um, the only way to know which ones do is by learning a bunch of them, learning a bunch of tunes, and getting hip to just that core harmonic movement. And so I think that's going to do people a lot more good, probably, than reading through a theory book.
Mm.
Um, Unless it's a theory book that walks you through that sort of thing. And there are some I have seen those that where they analyze a song, and I can find that I found that really really helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes total sense. That repertoire would be the key to, figuring all this stuff out.
The other thing about repertoire, it's like with soloing, there's such an emphasis placed on like playing through those changes and what are the notes in the chord and where's that arpeggio, and that's all amazing stuff. But if we really go back, and it's helpful to think about it, at least it is for me, what we are trying to do when we're improvising, we are trying to make melodies.
Mm.
And so, kind of being aware of what a melody is by learning a few really good ones by really smart people like Gershwin or Cole Porter or Irving Berlin. These people really knew what they were doing. Like, let's not just discard those melodies so we could get to the solos. There's a huge amount you can learn from those melodies. And you could actually structure a solo completely based on the melody. Um, you know in terms of what, the question often is like, what notes will work in this moment of the tune, or what notes work on that chord. Well, the composer told you a few. They gave you a melody to work with. There's a collection of notes that could work for a solo. So it's not always about the changes. It's look at those melodies in terms of structure and phrasing, but also in terms of like the note choices.
Obviously, like a melody is an improvised line of sorts. That makes total
It's
sense.
really
Well, Aaron, I've like got my head swimming right now. I feel like I need to go practice. I hope other folks were equally as inspired, getting to hear all your amazing thoughts. I just can't thank you enough for being here and for giving all this wisdom to us. I know like you've got an amazing book out there, Mandolin Chord Melody Systems, and you've got the Peghead Nation courses as well, which would be another amazing resource for folks who want to learn this style of playing. Do you have any other like future projects coming up, or any future courses coming out
Yeah, I
soon?
mean, there's some distant recording things that will likely be happening, and there's always stuff coming. I mean, anything that's relevant, I'll post about.
Well, folks, I'll include some links in the description below. But Aaron, thank you so much for this. This has been just a joy. Yeah, thanks, man.